Well, you're going so slow.
Yeah.
If you go below 5, there's more force pulling you down. So you need to keep the throttle up and the speed up through the whole thing. Hey, Motorman here, and that was ugly. You don't want that to happen to you. To prevent that from happening, I'm going to show you a couple of basic things. And if you may think this is for somebody who's been riding for 2 days, but I see people riding for 20 years that still don't know these very simple basic techniques. So come on, I'm going to show you exactly what they are and how to do it. Everything I'm about to show you is covered in great detail in this DVD. The Ride Like a Pro experience comes with the practice guide, 20 bucks. You can't beat that. Plus it helps us keep this YouTube channel going. If you don't buy my video. The first basic you need to familiarize yourself with is the proper use of the clutch and throttle, having the ability to ride in the friction zone. Now, the friction zone is the area of clutch travel between completely open when I release it and completely closed. Now, you notice when I let that clutch out, the bike starts to move a bit. It's entering the friction zone. I'm going to feed a little throttle. I'm going to let it out a little further, but never let it out all the way at low speeds. You need to be able to ride at about a walking pace, which is about 3.5 to 4 miles an hour. When you're doing this, you just need clutch and throttle, a little bit of throttle. I'm at what, 1500 RPMs, and you should be able to, here's a test for you, you should be able to do this. Rev the motor like that without picking up speed. That's your test. Am I in the sweet spot of the friction zone? Well, just rev the throttle. If the bike does this, leaps ahead, no, you've left the friction zone. It should take you all of maybe 15 minutes to master this, and I'm always amazed by the people that come to my class, been riding 20 years and have no conception of this, because they're used to just taking off and letting the clutch out all the way. That's the wrong thing to do, especially if you're in traffic or you're making low speed turns. You need to stay in that friction zone. And once you feel comfortable with that, by the way, you could use a little bit of steady light pressure on the brake, but you really don't need it when you're going this slow. It should be just clutch and throttle. Now, once you get that down, you want to pick your speed up a little bit, get to about 8 or 10 miles an hour, and start swinging and swaying that motorcycle just like this. It's an aggressive turn of the handlebars, and you need to realize that nothing horrible is going to befall you if you simply turn those bars. As long as you're above 5 miles an hour, the bike's not going to fall over. 5 miles an hour or below, there's more force pulling you to the ground than pulling you forward. So keep your speed 8 to 10 miles an hour. Turn those bars back and forth, get that motorcycle dipping, and when you learn this dip, you'll find that every low speed maneuver you ever perform will be so much easier if you use this dip. In order to get the bike dipping, you got to be above 5 miles an hour. Once you're comfortable with that, let's start really swinging and swaying. So we're going to do the same thing, low speeds, but we're going to turn those bars further so that the bike is really dipping and leaning from side to side. Now, if you find when you're doing that your RPMs are up like 3,000, like up here, yeah, that's going to burn out your clutch. But keeping the revs low, under 2,000 RPMs, the bike was designed for that. It's got a wet clutch. That means the clutch is cooled by oil. It's what the motorcycle was designed to do. Now that you're familiar with swinging and swaying that motorcycle and dipping that bike, yeah, start turning some U-turns. Now, this street that I'm on is 28 feet wide. I've measured it. This bike turns maximum lean angle in about 15 feet. So on a average street is 24 feet wide. So if you start making turns or U-turns on that street, you've got 9 feet to screw up and still make it. Turn your head and eyes. The further you turn your head and eyes, the further the handlebars will turn, and you gotta let the bike lean. Don't try to turn with the motorcycle straight up. You could also turn some big circles and do that in both directions. Here's the perfect spot to do some big circles. Again, in the friction zone, just a tiny bit of pressure on the rear brake. I'm going to the left, so I've got my head turned to the left. My head is not going to straighten out because there's no straight part to a circle. Your head should be turned in one direction or the other when you're making these turns. Make sure you practice to the right, because so many people have difficulty doing it to the right, and we want to practice what we find the most difficult to get better at it. So I got my head turned. Little by little, I'm tightening up these circles till eventually you should get to where you can touch the pegs or boards to the ground. You hear that scraping sound. It just says you've reached the limit of the lean angle, not to go any further. It's something you should know. You should know where that limit is, because at high speeds, you're coming around a turn of 50, and the very first time you hear those pegs scrape, you're going to panic, straighten up the motorcycle, and run right off the curb. Now we're going to pick up some speed, and we're going to do a little push steering or counter steering. I got to be above about 20 to get this feeling. Now watch this. I push forward on the left grip, the bike leans left and goes left. I push forward on the right grip, it leans right and goes right. There is no other way to make a motorcycle turn. Once you're above at about 15 miles an hour, it must lean in order to turn. And it's an easy thing to practice. You could practice it just about anywhere, as long as you're on a deserted road. You don't want to be practicing this while there's people behind you. But this is how it works. This is counter steering. I'm going to point the camera low so you can see this. I get up a little speed. I'm at, what, 20? I push forward on the left grip. The bike leans left and goes left. I push forward on the right grip. It leans right and goes right. That's counter steering. Don't let it confuse you. And that will take place seamlessly from low speeds when you're handlebar steering. Right now I'm turning the bars in the direction I want to go. And as I pick up speed comes the need to counter steer. But that's something that happens naturally. It's no big deal. You won't even notice it happening, but you should be aware of how to steer a motorcycle at speed. Because if a car comes in the other lane and comes into your lane and you try to turn your handlebars away from that car, that's going to push you right towards the car. If instead you push on the low grip or the right side, it'll lean to the right and go to the right. This ain't brain surgery, folks. Everybody who rides a motorcycle should know this stuff. It's basic knowledge, but the sad fact is not everybody knows it, because riders come to my class, like I said, been riding 20, 30 years, and they have no idea about these basics. You got to get the basics first before you can get down to really maneuvering that bike. Once again, I'll show you this again. I push forward, the bike leans left and goes left. I push forward on the right grip, it leans right and goes right. I'm not pushing down. Pushing down does absolutely nothing. Whatever direction you want to go left, push forward on the left grip. You want to go right, push forward on the right grip. Like I said, this ain't brain surgery, and a lot of people would disagree with that and say, no, that doesn't work. Just get on your bike and try it. Give a little push and you see what happens. The bike will lean left and go left, push to the right side, it leans right and goes right. Hopefully you enjoyed this and you learned something, and you'll get out and practice. If you spend just an hour on a deserted road or a parking lot practicing things like this, you'll be so much better rider. And if you want much more detailed instructions, yeah, get my Ride Like a Pro experience video. That'll show you exactly what you're going through in my class, because every exercise on that video is in the class. And generally I can improve people's skills by 200% when they come to that class. But if you know the basics first, everything will be a lot easier.